Okay. So now let's move a bit, dig a bit deeper into the projects that you have done. So, what are the areas that you specifically work on? So you talked about that there are robot applications that are emerging in agriculture and surgery and manufacturing. But what is your domain basically?
hmm So I would say my specialization right now is mobile robots and drones, and it's because of the kind of projects that I work on. Uh, so, for example, one of my clients, the company called Robosynthesis, they make modular robots based on ROS. So basically, the idea is that you have a mobile robot base and lots of sockets on the robot, and then if you want to, and for example, you have these motor modules that you can just attach really easily to the robot, and then the robot will work with these modules. And also, for example, if you want the navigation, you just grab a navigation module, you stack it on the top of the robot, and then suddenly your robot can navigate, can do slam and so on. And what I really like about this idea is that imagine you are operating this robot and then you have a problem with the motor. With a traditional robot design, you would need someone to disassemble the whole robot, just change the motor or change the part that's broken. And then it can take really a couple of hours to do it because of the complexity. But with this design, you just take out this motor that's been broken, and you just plug in a new one, and then you are okay to go. So it takes you 20 seconds to replace one faulty module if needed. So I really like the idea where they are going with this platform. And some other projects that I do, for
So
example, one,
this robot that
yeah.
you're talking about, this the main advantage is that it can be disassembled and assembled very easily. But is it also customizable? I mean, you can also have different, the sensor modules depending on the applications, right?
Yes, exactly. Uh, and as I said, it takes 20 seconds to disassemble the module and plug in a new one. And then it all depends on the company. So as this company is developing more modules, you could have your own that are really easily exchangeable. But also you can do it yourself. If you know ROS, you would be able to do that, I would assume.
So a more Lego block
Yeah,
inspired idea, I would say.
yeah, exactly.
So so you were talking about the other area in which you choose projects.
Mhm. So another example of a project that I'm doing is a customer wants to have an autonomous boat, basically maybe 1 meter long. So I'm doing all the sensor integration, all the workflow for gathering data. Um, I did also a couple of projects like integrating sensors for a customer,
Oh,
or yeah. So as I was saying, I did also some smaller projects like integrating some sensors for customers, tuning the AKF or basically robot localization for customer platforms. Probably like many more smaller jobs. Also, as a part of my consultancy, I was a reviewer of projects for some two European project calls. So basically, companies were making proposal for funding from some EU projects, uh, and I was evaluating the proposal on the technical terms. So saying if they meet the funding criteria for this project. So this was also quite interesting. Uh, Basically helping spend our tax money as well as possible, well, in a good way as possible.
So what are the things that you consider when choosing a project? Is it mostly based on the whether it's interesting to you or not, or are there other things that you take into account?
Mhm. So it really depends. I think there are multiple criteria. So for example, uh, like the first one and probably most important is price, because
Okay,
if someone is not willing to pay my rate, then uh, I don't work for them, right?
yeah,
Um,
it's
there's
important.
also, yeah. Then yeah, if the project is not too far off from my interests and my expertise, then I would take it as well.
Hmm.
Uh, I wouldn't take a project if there is no, basically, I don't have experience in something. Well, I wouldn't tell the customer, okay, I can do it, even though I never did it. Like, I'm always really open about what I know and what I don't know.
Yeah,
And then if there's a situation like this, then I highlight this to the customer and then they can make a decision. Usually the answer is, I don't know this, but I can look it up and learn it for you. Um, and then there's like probably completely different category of whether I will take a project or not, but it really depends on the customer. So if there are some customers that are really um, that you don't enjoy to work for, because, for example, they are too controlling, or they are really picky about certain stuff, or they won't allow you to do stuff or micromanage you. Um, and in such cases, if I sense that there is something like that, I wouldn't take the project, because it's good for my basically you feel better because you don't have to go through this hell of a project,
yeah.
and it's also better for the customer, really, because they can find someone else who will fit them. So if there's this incompatibility, I don't take the project, because it's not worth it.
Okay. And how often do you take projects, and how it of course it depends on the project, but what is the typical duration of a project? You do one project a month or five projects a
Mhm.
month? How do you go about it?
So it really depends. It's anything, really. I have some customers that I've worked with for more than 2 years, and then I have some projects that lasted basically 1 hour, like doing the consultation, getting right,
Okay.
right into the problem and trying to fix it. So it really, really depends.
Okay. And is there also a difference in pay scale in freelancing? I mean, of course, in freelancing, you have the choice to earn more by doing more projects. But is it comparable to a typical 9 to 5 industry job in the field of robotics? Or is there always a gap that you cannot fulfill? Or is it way more, or you can take it to any level that you want depending on you?
Uh, I would say it really depends. Like yeah, it all depends, because the good thing is, if you are a freelancer, you ideally get paid by the hour or by the project. So about the pay scale. So the pay scale, it's as usual, it depends. Everything in the world depends on something. You can work 60 hours a week. Of course, and you get paid by every hour or by the project, and then of course your pay would be higher, at least compared to the companies that will pay you a fixed price for your 40 hours a week, like the usual company. Um, but of course, this is not sustainable, and Yeah, the correct answer is probably what you said, that it can go as high as possible. It only depends on the clients who uh, who are willing to pay for your expertise. So basically, your work is worth as much as someone is willing to pay for it. That's
Hmm.
probably that's how I think about this. And and yeah, you can especially because it's also good to distinguish between freelancing and consulting. So when we say freelancer, or I think contractor, uh, for me these are very similar terms, and this would be someone that's actually working by, I would say, by doing like really hands-on stuff, programming, for example, or software development. And for me, consultant is someone who does more thinking and stuff that is really high level, and then this stuff gets distributed to other contractors or employees of the company. Um, and I think if you do proper consulting, this is worth more to the companies than contracting or freelancing.
Hmm.
So if you do consulting, then of course you should expect a higher pay,
Hmm.
but also, well, the people will pay you as much as they think. Yeah, as long as they think they get good value for what you offer them. So
Okay.
it all depends on the path that you take.
Yeah. So, but it must have been really hard to get your first client, right? Do you remember the first client that you got, and what was the first freelance project that
Yeah,
you did?
yeah. So I started freelancing on this Upwork platform.
Upwork, yeah.
Upwork, yeah. So the first thing that I figured out that no one will hire me unless I have some job done previously.
Hmm.
So the first thing I decided to make a job for peanuts basically, and my first job was basically porting some C# code to Python,
Hmm.
and I've earned $10, and it took me about 8 days to do it. So
Okay.
it was a good start. But then after that, I had a quite interesting project with camera control. So not really robotics, but those PTZ cameras. So the cameras that can move in
Okay.
uh, two axis and zoom. Uh, so I did that. Uh, yeah, so I did this project, and it was already a decent payout. And um, right around this time, I put my notice in the company I was working for, and I didn't have any projects lined up. But I decided that I will go full on into freelancing and see what happens.
Okay.
I also had a 6 months worth of runway money. So I thought that if something goes wrong, I will definitely find a normal job somehow. But decided to risk it all. And I think halfway into my notice period, I got hired for a job with Robosynthesis, so the modular robotics company that I've told you about. And
Hmm.
I have been working with them since. So I've been really lucky, I would say, when it comes to freelancing, um, because having one long-term client is a very good safety net.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
So,
and
so normally, for a freelancer, what my view was that you would have like projects with different companies, but you can also secure a contract with one company for long-term projects, which is more secure, would you
mhm.
say?
Yeah, but I think. Something you need to be mindful of in this context is that in some companies, in some countries, sorry, there is a requirement for you if you are self-employed that you need more than one client,
Okay.
because otherwise you might be breaking the law for employer-employee relationship. So basically, it would be a tax avoidance on the from the perspective of some governments.
Hmm.
So if you want to do it, make sure that this is covered, or you get more clients. In some countries, you can say that, okay, I have this one client, but I'm really actively looking, so I'm doing the best I can do, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but I think the aspects like this are very important to research before, yeah, starting.
So you mentioned Upwork. What are the other platforms that you have your profile on and get freelance work from, and also
Uh,
for consulting?
yeah. So there is. So I do only Upwork. I don't do use any other platform.
Hmm.
And I like it quite. Yeah, I quite like this. So the disadvantage of Upwork is that they take 20% commission for the first $500 that you earn with the client. So it's
Oh,
quite steep. But also, well, if you are earning a Western developer salary on your project, you should get to this first 500 really quickly, as it's especially relevant to long-term projects. Um, but then, yeah, it drops to 10%, which is almost manageable. Well, it's all right. It's not too bad for uh, the safe, well, kind of safety that you get from Upwork, because they allow you to basically, if you do contracts that pay by the hour, and if you use their timer tracking software that takes screenshot of your screen, which many
oh,
people don't like.
yeah.
But if you use that, they guarantee you the payment. So if the so this is very good, especially if you are starting and you need to build first relationship and you need to make sure that you get paid. Uh, I had a situation like this where clients didn't pay on Upwork, but because I had the screen timer running, Upwork paid me straight away, and then they handled the situation with the client. So this was good.
Ah, okay.
Uh,
So with
and
Upwork,
also,
it's uh, more safe, and you would get paid anyway, even if there's some conflict with the client.
yeah, you would get paid by also, but also like you need this proof that you've been working, right? So
Yeah.
you cannot just leave your screen running and I don't know, watch Netflix and assume you will get paid. But if they see that
Exactly.
you've actually done the work and you can justify it, then you should be all right. Um, and the second thing that I consider good about Upwork is discoverability, because lots of people find me through there. The people who wouldn't find me otherwise. So that's why I usually don't complain about the fees, because I wouldn't get these clients anyway. So
Mm.
it's worth the money for me. Um, and the second way I get clients is through either my connections or my website or weekly robotics, which I think we'll go through at some point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think the split right now is about 80-20. So I get 80% of work requests from Upwork and 20 from my personal website.
Okay. So most of the clients that you get are from Upwork.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you also do some marketing on other social media of, by sharing your newsletter posts or your previous projects or your portfolio even?
Mhm. So every time I kind of do that, but not very actively. Every time I do add a blog post to my personal blog, um, I will share it on my newsletter and also on LinkedIn. Yeah, mostly LinkedIn. And then yeah, that's about as much as I do.
Okay.
But I get quite a lot of traction from this from my blog because I tend to, well, some of the reviews or tutorials that I do are very relevant to the clients, and they see that I have experience with this particular hardware
Yeah.
or software, and that they want this, so they hire me. So this is good.
Yeah, interesting. So also the lifestyle of someone who is a freelancer is totally different from someone who is working as an employee in a company. You have more flexibility, you have freedom to choose your projects more or less, and but you also have to market yourself. You have to struggle with finding clients, so that would be a challenge. Uh, but also for times like uh, the COVID-19 situation, people are getting laid off from their jobs. So it's also a very uh, a more secure way to go about working, and also you're working remote, so that would not really be affected that much. So what do you think about the future of work? Is it going more towards freelancing direction, or doing your own work, the digital nomad lifestyle, if I can put it
Mhm,
that way, because you can work from anywhere you want basically, as long as you are delivering it? What is the
mhm,
future of work look like, not just in robotics, I mean generally?
mhm. Yeah, I think it's COVID situation taught us quite a bit about remote work. Uh, so I think lots of companies might realize that the people that work for them are productive at home
Yeah,
because some companies were not open to remote work at all. But because of this need to adjust, they found. I hope lots of them found that this is actually working well for lots of people and companies. But I think so, and this can be a huge saving for the company if they don't need the space to host all these people. And if these people don't have to commute, it's also better for the environment.
yeah,
Um, but of course, not everyone can work from home. Like it's very good with software because it's easy, or
yeah,
something where you just use your computer. If you need to use tools and so on, it's more difficult. So for robotics, it's for traditional robotics company, this is difficult. But I've seen companies that are doing basically flexible time at home. So if you have a particular software task that you need to do and you don't need a robot, then you can stay home and do it from home, which is, I think, very nice and very healthy. Uh, but also at the same time, with this remote work, you need to be mindful of basically the needs of people to connect to each other.
exactly.
I know that when I started, I had a period when I walked out of my home and I did stuff normally, but I never really talked to anyone outside except my girlfriend and family on Skype for about 3 or 4 weeks. And I didn't really pay attention to it, didn't realize it. But then it's you sort of start missing like a human connection, really.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, and around this time, I also rented an office in a co-working space, and I generally found that I'm way more productive in an office. even if it's office with not your co-workers, but with some people that work on another things.
Mm,
Um, so for me, this worked well, and well, we'll see what the future brings. But maybe having co-working spaces that are more local to people than their headquarters of their company can be one of the solutions to still
yeah.
get people in the office, so they are not at home where there are some children that will interrupt every call and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Um, and especially for these people who cannot focus at home, because it's also a problem
Yeah.
for some.
So nowadays, do you prefer to work from home, or I mean, of course, the co-working spaces would not be open, but
Yeah.
generally, you prefer to work from home or co-working space?
So I stopped. So my co-working space is not a traditional one, so it was open the whole time, so I could use it if I wanted to.
Hmm.
But I haven't been there because of the virus situation, and I sort of got used to working at home. So I soon need to test it again and see if I'm still more productive in the office or at home.
Okay.
Because I think I got used to working from home quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's one of the advantages of these situations, that you have to learn to work from home, and
Yeah,
once you get used to
exactly.
it, it's way more convenient if
Mhm.
you can also be managed to be productive. So that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. But
Now,
about
yeah.
if you do robotics, you really need a workshop, and that's what I'm learning now the hard way. Like there are boxes of stuff all around me, like they are neatly stowed away so you don't see them.
Okay.
But it's really a mess with all the stuff that you need. So I think the next step in my freelancing career is to get a proper workshop and have everything organized neatly in a nice space. And yeah, need to work with tools sometimes, so it's better not to do it at home.
So for hardwares, the clients deliver the products at your place, or do you access the hardware through SSH or remotely in another way?
Uh, so it all depends. Generally, uh, usually clients send me the hardware if it's needed. For lots of the tasks that they can be done in software or simulation, so you don't even need to touch the hardware, especially if you work on high level. Uh, but I prefer to have the hardware with me because it's SSHing or using TeamViewer doesn't really work that well, because quite often you need to connect something, disconnect something, and then you need to explain another person what they need to do. And it takes about 3 times more time to debug some hardware issues than it would take
Yeah.
you if you had the hardware next to you. So I prefer to have the hardware with me. But I'm finding that for lots of the projects that I'm doing, I don't need the hardware anyway, so that's good.
Okay. So but if you need it, then the clients would send it to your place,
Yeah,
or
sometimes
arrange it in some way.
yeah, sometimes I do this SSH debugging, but it's not often. I try not to take this, and if the project requires me to do full SSH to some stuff, I would probably be very hesitant to take it, because uh, it's it can be very well. It is difficult, way more difficult than if you have full access to hardware.
Yeah, definitely. Now let's talk about your weekly robotics newsletter. Uh, Tell us about what you share there and why you do it.
Yeah. So weekly robotics is my side project where I every Monday, before it was Sunday, I'm sending out a newsletter with about, well, it's always 7 or more links related to robotics. So it would be robotics news or robotics projects, some research, interesting research going on. And I provide a link and a short summary of what I think is interesting about this thing, or basically, well, give a short intro to the link. And I've been working on this for over 2 years, and it was born out of once I said it was born out of procrastination, because I was spending lots of time checking out some links, some robotics news and so on. And I thought that if I put maybe 2 more hours into that, I could turn my research that I was doing anyway into something that might be interesting to other people. Um, and yeah, I did just that. It turned out to be a bit more than 2 hours. So on average, I spend between 4 to 6 hours a week on this. So it's close to a full working day. Um, but I think it's very good for me, because now if I want to come back to some project, I know where to look at, because before it wasn't the case. So I was remembering that I saw this kind of project that was solving exactly this one thing that I was looking for, but I wouldn't be able to find it. Uh,
So it serves more as a organized repository where you can visit again if you need more inspiration or you need something for your other project, basically. But it's
uh,
also helping others simultaneously.
yeah, yeah, and also it has grown quite a bit. Like we have about I think with all the RSS feeds and so on, there's about 2,000 readers now.
Oh, that's
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, so it's uh, and right now I'm trying to build it into more of a community thing. So it's not just me like saying things, but it's also something that other people can chime in and basically take part in this somehow. Um, I'm still not 100% sure how to do that. I have some ideas, but I will be looking into that in the next couple of months when I get some free time.
Yeah, interesting that you plan to build a community around that space, because then you can, share your ideas together and be in a like-minded group where everyone more or less thinks in the same way, and you can learn from them and they can learn from you. So that would be
Yeah,
ideal.
yeah, that would be perfect.
Yeah. So, uh, yeah, now let's conclude the freelancing section by just asking you, uh, how hard is it to make as a successful freelancer? You almost shared your most of your journey there. How hard is it, and what advice would you give to someone who is willing to uh, start out as a freelancer?
Mhm. Um, I think first thing we would need to define is what is a success really. Um, when I started, the definition for me of success in freelancing was that I would earn enough money to support myself
Hmm.
and basically focus on the things that I want to focus. So basically, if I want to take a day off, I should be able to. Uh, and I would highly recommend setting basically this something similar to this as a goal. Like don't aim to earn $200,000 a year in your first year, because it's probably quite difficult to get that.
Hmm.
Um, so I think start modestly and don't have too high expectations. Uh, I would almost advise, if you want to start freelancing, uh, and your job allows you to do that on the side, because there might be some legal things preventing you from doing that.
Hmm.
Make sure that you are covered, and like when it comes to legal stuff from the company that employs you, when it comes to taxes and so on.
Yeah.
Because this, well, you need to do things, well, ideally you should do the the things like legally and correctly. Um, and the reason I'm suggesting that you try to do both at the same time, if possible, is that it takes quite a bit of risk away from that.
Yeah.
Because well, I consider myself lucky with all the projects that I've gotten. There was definitely quite a bit of luck involved in this. And I think I had times that if I didn't have this one particular project, I wouldn't continue being a freelancer. So it's you need to be ready for that, and ideally, that's also why I had this 6 months of runway money in case something goes wrong, because I went sort of all in, but with this safety buffer. So I'd recommend having that as well, because it's because otherwise you can get stressed, and it's difficult to operate in your full capacity when you are stressed. So I would highly recommend that. Um, and some other advice I can give is basically, um, so it's not really specific to consulting, but my advice is to always uh, doubt yourself, kinda. So I don't mean it's like you should be confident, of course, but you should doubt in the things that you are doing, um, in a way that if you are writing software, assume that you are making mistakes, and assume that okay, things will go wrong, and what should happen if they go wrong.
Okay.
Um, and this should ideally help you build safe systems, because in robotics, safety is the number one priority.
Yeah.
uh, if so, make sure that, yeah, like there are safety stops. The code, when it crashes, it kills all the software, like especially anything that drives any motors. It has to be off.
Mm.
um, and always try to break your systems as well when you are developing them, because that's one way you can test if something goes wrong, that you will ensure that things don't go out of control. So
Yeah.
if you crash very hard, like don't do soft crashes, like crash the whole system and make the robot stop midway to somewhere, and not drive where it's not sure where it actually is, and so on. Uh, this would be my main advice, I think. But be
So
confident in the stuff that you are doing at the same time. So balance this out somehow.
so being confident, but at the same time being aware of the ways in which the robot can fail and can disrupt the system, that just premeditating the things that could go wrong, so that so that it functions properly when it needs to, and does not, and is not unsafe for uh,
Yeah.
the workspace and the people around.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And also, so slightly related to that, but if you see something unethical going on, like someone asks you to do stuff that you are not 100% sure is safe for the operators and so on, uh, raise the flags, red flags, wherever applicable in the system or in the company. Because I think as a robotics engineer, it's our responsibility to see the full picture always and ensure that everyone is safe. So, and for me, if someone asked me to do something that I would believe would be a risk to humans,
Hmm.
and this actually happened in my at one point in my life, you should take it uh, to the relevant person and say that, okay, you think that this is unsafe, and ideally someone else should prove to you that this is actually safe. uh, Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think yeah, having high standards is always very good. Uh,
So safety is number one in robotics,
yeah,
and you cannot compromise on it in any way.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So yeah, so you were talking about the other area that you work on.
Yeah. So for example, one of my clients
Uh,
want to.
sorry. Can you hear some background noise? I think one
Yeah,
of
yeah,
my,
I can.
yeah. Just hold on. Just hold
Sounds like a dentist.
on. I think it's the vacuum cleaner. But just a
Mhm.
minute.
Yeah.
Hey guys, so this was part 2.1 of the talk with Mateusz Sadowski. In this talk, we focused on the professional aspects of what Matt does for a living, his freelancing work, and we also talked about what it is like to be a freelance engineer in the robotics area, what are the different projects that he does, and what you could be pursuing if you are willing to have a career in this field, how difficult it is to make it as a freelancer in this area, what is the amount of money that you can make, what are the platforms that you should be focusing on if you are interested in making it in this area. And in the next part, we'll dig a bit deeper into the robotics technical aspects and how you can be learning robotics on your own, and a lot of other interesting resources that he has to offer. Apart from that, we also talk about what robotics is generally and what are the different fields in robotics that are booming and in which you can find a suitable career. There's a lot more content there, so if you're interested in listening to these kinds of conversations, consider hitting subscribe button and also hitting the notification icon so that you get notified on time whenever the next video, the next part is out. Also, I make sure that I upload small clips of these podcasts on a much regular basis, so that if you don't have time to watch the full podcast, you can benefit from the clips themselves. Apart from that, if you're someone who would prefer to listen to the podcast instead of watching the full video, the entire podcasts are also available on podcast platforms like Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. So feel free to check out the Building Culture podcast.